When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
Thank you, Dr. Steven, for your time. I know you're very busy, but a lot of people said to me, you need to speak to Dr. Steven. Reading through your achievements and CV is mind-blowing, and the amount of things you do is staggering. How are you today?
Well, I'm just as busy as ever, but I'm very, very happy to be here. So, I've always had long admired your work, so very happy to talk to you at last.
Thank you very much. I noticed that you're supporting so many people and you're sharing so many things. And I've been listening to one of your interviews recently when you said that you've got loads of enemies. And my first thought was that is it because you set up the organization which kind of break that authoritarian setup? Because you've got a full democracy if you're in your organization, and you said you don't even know how many dojos you've got.
No, we guess that we've got about 7,000 students around the world, but we don't keep records of the normal sort. I've got enemies in martial arts establishments around the world precisely because of this open access, democratic way of doing things. But I'm also involved in a lot of diplomatic work internationally. And so it's very, very easy to make enemies in that field. And in the academic field, which is how I earn my living, it's actually quite amazing how petty-minded many academic colleagues can be. So many, many jealousies. So let's say in pretty much every walk of my life, I've got people who don't like me very much.
I think that's in all walks of life. You just got a small-minded people who are jealous about everything, and wherever you go, it happens. No matter if it's karate or academia or working in a field or something like that. So you've been working a lot in Africa. I'm really interested in that kind of what did you see the benefits were for working with people who've come from very disadvantaged backgrounds through using karate? Because you're academic, you kind of analyze everything from what I understood from your other podcast. What data can you share about the impact of karate for people's life in that area?
Okay, well, two things. I mean, the old saying about boxing your way out of the ghetto, you can kick your way out of the ghetto as well. So karate helps with discipline, with self-regard, looking after yourself in violent places. But karate can only do so much by itself. And that's why in all of our programs in Africa and other emerging countries around the world, we also have very, very much charitable or philanthropic activities going on. So we help people go to school. We help people complete their education. If they're very, very sick and the public hospitals can't cope, we'll, if we can afford it, pay for private medicine to help people. So it's not just karate, it's trying to enrich people's lives so they get a chance to stand on their own feet. So probably the educational side of things is very important. Now, this is where karate does come into play. We work on a very, very simple basis that if you've had the discipline sufficient to get a black belt, then you've got the discipline to be able to succeed at your studies. So if after you attain black belt, you want to continue your studies, go back to school, or even in some cases start school in the first place, we'll help you. There are some exceptions to that where you don't have to have a black belt. We've started in concert with colleagues a project in the most violent slum in Lusaka, Zambia, where the girls couldn't go to school. This is a special club for girls, young ladies. And I went down for the opening of this new dojo, led by one of our female senseis. And the new government had just made education tuition free.
Mhm.
So I said to the girls, well, will you go to school now that it's meant to be free? And they said, no, we can't because tuition is free, but the schools still want us to come in school uniforms, school shoes, school bag, and bring our own writing materials. And our families just can't afford that. And so I said to the sensei, work out how much it costs per girl, and we'll finance it. So we're doing that now in concert with local charities as well, local foundations. But something small like that can go a long, long way. I mean, per girl, it costs about $50 US dollars fully to equip her to go to school. That's not a big thing. That's not a
Mm.
big thing. So small gestures like that can really make a difference in someone's life. And above all, it transforms the life of the community. So the ghetto improves in terms of its appreciation of education. The girls come home and teach their parents. It's fantastic. So we're always doing things like that, not just kicking and punching, but also trying to do something that is helpful to people.
I'm guessing that I spoke with Mary Stevens, who does a similar job in India, and I'm wondering if there's the similar barriers to girls in particular going into school and martial arts, because in India they are not allowed because they need to get married and stuff. Is it in Africa the similar kind of approach to it, or is it simply because they are so poor that not afford?
It's mostly poverty because you can't generalize Africa. There are about 2,000 different ethnic groups in Africa, 55 modern states, modern countries. Everyone is a bit different. So in whichever country we're working in, we try to pay particular attention to the differences. I try to respect local culture, but we are very, very much committed to the principle that no matter what the local culture is, everyone is equal, all men and women, everyone should have a shot at equality and the benefits that equality brings. So that gets us into trouble sometimes, obviously, but that's a key principle in terms of the organization. I mean, the name of the organization that I'm somehow the head of, Jindokai, is basically a Buddhist term, the way of compassion. And I didn't want to have a title that was all about kicking and punching. It wasn't going to be Cobra Kai or something like that. It was going to be something which is meant to be the bedrock of karate. It's meant to have that ethos. And many people forget about that underlying ethos. So I'm a Buddhist myself, so it just seemed natural that we should try to bring these values together as well as kicking and punching. Now, having said that, we're very good at kicking and punching. I mean, we've won national championships in every single bloody country in which we work. We monopolize international teams and things like that. We try to set the example. We're still on, my immediate associates in Britain, older people, we're still on the master circuit. This very, very polite word for the Zimmer frame circuit. But at the age of 75, I'm still competing just to set an example. And it hurts like crazy. It absolutely hurts like crazy. But, you can't tell people to do things if you yourself are not prepared to show that you are willing, at least to try to do
Mm.
things.
Yeah, I do see very often your videos sparring. I don't know if it's your son or student in a gym. You
No, no,
always.
he's my student, but he himself was a champion. He was London
Mm.
champion. He's about 20 years younger than me, so keeping up with him is the key task. We have a sparring workout every Saturday.
Mhm.
He's very, very kind to me, and he tries to tell me what to do in the competitions. He comes and enters the competitions now as well,
Mm.
because it start at the age of 35 and then go up every 5 years until you get to my age. And so he enters, he wins medals too. And so the whole thing is very, very much structured around having a good time. We train properly, we diet properly, and we behave like athletes. But what we do, we have a tradition that after the competition is over, we find a very, very good restaurant that serves very, very good wine, and we just have a good time. So it's a very human activity as well.
I think that support group is very important. It makes a difference. Especially I see it in my kind of work with people with mental health. Having that supportive and non-judgmental environment helps a lot. Which brings me to the question: what was the impact on your mental health going through the karate? Did you notice any positive, negative?
That's hard to say because I've been involved with martial arts since I was very, very young. It came with being part of this particular family I was born into. And there was a martial arts born of the warlord era in China. Uh, in the first part of the 20th century, China was very, very violent. Big changes were happening, and no one was controlling those changes. And so my grandmother was the leader of the village militia. She was a swordswoman. Later, when the Japanese invaded that part of China, they all had to escape and managed to reach New Zealand, of all places. But basically, it meant that I couldn't escape martial arts.
Mhm.
So I can't say how it changed my life. It's always been there in some way as part of my life. What did help very, very much was in the early 1970s, I decided that I wanted to have more structured tuition. And so I joined the roughest and toughest karate dojo in town, and it really
Mhm.
was the roughest and the toughest karate dojo in town. The sensei was about my age. He was a young man in his 20s, early 20s, and he'd been the Southeast Asian and South Pacific champion already. And we got on very, very well. It was very, very clear that there was a kindred spirit there. But he was also very, very strict. His standards were very high. And putting that structure into my life helped a very great deal. There was already a very great deal of structure in my life. I became, round about that time, the editor of the 10th largest newspaper in
Mhm.
New Zealand. It was a weekly newspaper. But in those days, before digital technology, before computers, which has made it much easier, everything was done manually. If you missed any one of 29 deadlines in a week, the paper didn't come out. And that was a
Wow.
disaster. So you just got used to having a structured life. So moving into a structured training environment with my new sensei, whose name was Karl Sargent, that was very, very helpful indeed. And their openness to different people. The dojo was full of Hells Angels, truckies, uh, and this crazy young intellectual that was me. And we all got on like a house on fire. When the first books by Masayama came out, they weren't just pictures of Masayama beating up on bulls and stuff like that. He
Mhm.
tried to write some philosophy essays in these books as well. So the others would come to me in the dress room and say, Stephen, give us a seminar. What does Ayama mean when he writes this? What does he mean when he writes that? Because they'd not been very well educated.
Mhm.
So I was pretty much accepted into this rather violent group simply because of the fact that I could contribute something to
Mm.
their learning. So for me, education and karate have gone together for a very long time. Apart from karate, I've studied many other arts as well. It's almost impossible not to have done this and having traveled so much and met so many people. So there are a few Chinese arts and also Korean arts in the back catalogue as well. And in terms of the Japanese arts, there's a lot of
Mhm.
Aiki-jutsu, as well as Iai and Kobudo in the back catalogue as well. So it's a bit of a mixture. I basically just teach karate these days. I try not to
Mhm.
teach too much of the other stuff.
So why karate is so special in your heart? If you're doing Aiki and everything else in because for me, I can't pinpoint it. I tried other things, but I always circle back to karate.
The other arts were very, very useful. For instance, the proposition that the Okinawan arts were invented so people, peasants, would have some self-defense against the
Mm.
invading samurai. Well, I wanted to see whether it actually works. And so the only way I could learn whether it works or not was by learning how to use the Japanese sword,
Hmm.
learn the Iai. So I learned Iai, and I have to say, it doesn't work against a katana. The peasants would just be cut to pieces. But that meant that you had to do things and learn things by practical investigation. Also in Okinawa, my teacher there, Sensei Toma, was very famous for what the Okinawans called tuide, which is a form of grappling,
Joint locks, right?
locking. That's right. And that basically married in with Aiki work. There are only so many ways you can lock up a wrist, for
Hmm.
instance. And so because that was part of the syllabus, I decided when I was not in Okinawa, I would actually find people who could teach me how to do it in a very, very advanced way. So I found Aikido teachers and later Aikijutsu teachers. And again, that was married in with the learning from karate. The interpretation of Sensei Toma of many of the kata, the bunkai that he used, was very much close quarter work, which involved grappling, locking up an opponent. These days, the Goju teachers do this all the time. When I started in the 1970s in the structured program, no one was thinking like that. It was only when I got to Okinawa in the 1980s that this whole way of doing things was opened up to me.
Yeah, I remember that some of my friends from my dojo went into a system by Seiyu Oyata. So they had all that kind of Okinawan really close grappling, which is kind of on outside. I think it's from the Nakamura Sensei lineage. So that was kind of opening eyes as well. That oh wow, you're doing that, and now everybody does it now.
Yeah, that's
But
very popular now. And of course, the kind of work that very, very good teachers like yourself, like Yen Abernathy, are doing popularizes it, opens the eyes of many other people. And, karate has changed a lot, as you know, over the years. It's developed into a far more open-minded way of doing things. At one stage, the different styles of karate were almost like churches. You couldn't go to
mm,
another church. Now it's open. Now it's a more mature way of approaching the arts. I'm very, very happy about that.
yeah, you can see the difference, but there's still pockets of don't go there because they might be more cool than we are. So, better than don't go there. Stay with us, do our stuff. But it is changing. What I like about karate is that I say it's got many faces and everybody can choose the one they like. So, if you want to do sports one, there's avenue for you. If you want to do applications, there's one for you. If you want to do a kata only or meditation, there's always avenue for you. So I think that that is a very good selling point for karate that everybody in any age can do it. And you're a perfect example, right? You are that's my group of your age uh, kind of related says that they are not so young, not old but not so young, and they enjoying doing katas. We're doing every week. We've got about 15 people age up to 100 years old doing a karate kata, and they never thought they're gonna be doing karate if you told them 20 years ago.
Yeah, you can keep doing it. But I like to challenge myself. So when I go to Africa, and I've got many young champions in Africa, uh, people in their 20s and early 30s, I always take a bit of time and spar with them. I mean, I have to say they're very kind to
Mm.
me, but I do want to get on the floor and still show that I can do one or two small things. Also, doing this kind of thing keeps you humble as well. Uh, so a lot of my tuition, when I've been wandering over East Asia, is simply, I'm introduced to a very senior master, and you know what's going to happen. He's going to assemble all his students, and he's going to say in front of all of his students, "This is Stephen Chan. He's a very famous karate teacher. So today we're going to compare techniques,"
Hmm.
which is a simple way of saying that he's going to beat up on me. And you've got to let him win, because of course you've got to be courteous to the person who's
Yeah.
your host. But you can't let him win too easily, A, because you've got pride, but B, the students have got to see that the master could overcome anything that was thrown at
Mm.
him. So these become diplomatic engagements. But for weeks, if not months afterwards, I'm trying to work out in my head, replaying, how did he do that? What did he do to do that? So this has happened several times now, places like Taiwan in particular, where the teachers are very, very open-minded. And I've learned a very, very great deal basically by letting myself get into these situations and then reflecting on them for quite a long time afterwards.
How do you keep yourself motivated in your age to actually go and spar? Because I see so many people like 40 years old, 50s. Oh, I'm too old. I'm the teacher. I'm just gonna be teaching. I don't want to spar. I don't have, power for it. I don't lost my mojo. But yet you keep going and just pushing the barriers of your age.
Well, I mean, I don't believe this old saying age is just a number because it hurts like crazy.
Yeah.
I understand why people want to retire, but no, I mean, I can't see myself putting on a blazer and just being a manager or being a referee. Um, and besides, I spend so much time complaining that referees are blind anyway, so I don't want to be accused of being blind as well. No, I mean, I don't know why. It just seemed natural to keep going. Maybe it's late middle age or early old age vanity. I don't know what it
Mm.
is. Maybe I've got a mental disease. I might need help from you, Les. But basically, it just seems natural every morning when I get up. That later on in that morning, before lunch, I'm going to go to the gymnasium. The first half of the workout is, of course, keeping the body in shape, and the second half is all martial arts. So
Hmm.
it just seems a natural thing to do each day. And I'm very, very careful with my diet. So I really would like to know one day what it's like to have a gigantic T-bone steak with a bottle of wine and a cigar, but that hasn't happened for a long, long time.
Well, then you would have to have about 2 days break to digest it and recover from the alcohol.
That's right, absolutely. I don't mind the odd glass of wine or whiskey, but I really don't drink that much. So, but it is a treat, as I say, at the end of a big competition to find a
Mm.
restaurant and sit down, with one or two bottles with my friends of good stuff.
What do you find in the different regions of the world? What motivation works for people? Because I can see only a small thing, but between Poland and UK, people respond to the motivation differently. That's the word I'm looking for. So in Poland, kind of culture is we're pointing out you done this wrong, that wrong, and there's not so much praising. Which in UK, people respond better to praising, and I'm wondering how it is with Africa and other countries.
Basically, I know exactly what you're talking about because I've taught in Europe as well. But in African countries, for the most part, it's very facilitative culture. In other words, people will encourage others. There's a downside as well because in many traditional communities, um, those who are older are meant to be able to enjoy respect, and sometimes they abuse that. So I'm always trying to set an example of not trying to be high and mighty just because I'm older or more senior or whatever. And I found in my travels in East Asia that this whole culture of respect, simply because you're more senior or simply because you're older, is far more complicated than what people think. In other words, you've still got to have the goods to show that you deserve that kind of respect. So I try to point that out in Africa. Look, you might be older, you might be more senior, but you better front up and show you can still do stuff. Some stuff, even if it's only a little bit, you
Mm,
should be able to do that very, very well. And I think that message has gotten across in the countries in which I teach.
amazing. Um, which countries you prefer to teach in? Where you feel more at home in kind of.
Well, I feel at home pretty much most places I travel, although I've been to these countries many, many times. And I lived in Zambia for 5 or 6 years. I've had long residencies in South Africa. I think I probably visited Zimbabwe about 70 times. So I'm very, very familiar with these places. And whether I get back to Zimbabwe again in the near future is another question because I was arrested and deported from Zimbabwe last year.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interested. Can you
uh,
share more? Is your
yeah,
karate? You've been punching people too much.
no, no, I mean, that was the accusation of the government newspapers. And I was there to
Ah,
observe
okay.
the elections and also to train insurgents from the opposition party. after they lost the election. Now, in fact, I
But
wasn't training insurgents at all, but that was the message put out by the government newspapers, and they were waiting for me at the aircraft door when I landed in Zimbabwe. So it was a very, very interesting moment. They turned me around after the paperwork, and I had to fly back to Zambia, where I had just come from. I'd been teaching karate there. And it was really strange, two countries side by side. In Zambia, where I had just been, the president had just given me a medal. And then I fly to Zimbabwe, and they arrest me and throw me out. So different political cultures, different countries, different levels of toleration. But I have many, many friends in Zimbabwe, so I do hope at some point I'll be able to go back. Probably hold a big international clinic in Zambia at some stage in the future, and the Zimbabweans can come up to that, so I won't lose contact with my students. So the countries of Southern Africa I like very much. Ethiopia I like very much, particularly the older Ethiopia. Capital city Addis Ababa is far too modernized now. When I first went there in the 1990s, eagles flew in the skies just like sparrows fly in the sky. It was just absolutely amazing, especially at sunset when hundreds of eagles would be flying in the sky. So those kinds of things really amaze me and impress me. And everywhere, wherever I go, I always visit the slums, ask what I can do to give back, as it were. I don't want to be like other academics who just come to countries to research and to loot information. If there's something I can give back, I will do my best to give something back to the people of that particular country.
I think this is very admirable, and we need more people like yourself, Mary, and other projects who actually doing that work, traveling around, helping people. And you must have seen a huge change in Africa over the years.
Yeah, it's all modernized a lot. There has been development, although it's very uneven. There's still a growing class of people who are not enjoying development. They're still living below the poverty line and things like that. By and large, in settled countries, they get by. What really is very, very hard to take is when, as I used to, I don't so often do so now, I go to war zones and see the results of mass violence. So what do you do to pick up the pieces? And at one stage, my paid job was to help pick up the pieces. And that was very, very, you can't let it get to you. You can't be brokenhearted about it, otherwise you're useless. You're there to help. But for a long time afterwards, you can't help but think about what you saw. So those kinds of things you never quite forget. And it's meaningful to me because, I come from a refugee background. My family were refugees, as I said, to New Zealand. And, I knew what it was like growing up as a disadvantaged minority in a faraway country with a very, very different culture. So try my best to be understanding and try my best to do a little bit to help people in the world. And basically, the one thing you learn is that everyone is bloody well the same. They've all got the same hopes, fears, aspirations, loves, hatreds, and it's quite easy to get on with people. All they need is a chance.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Stephen. I know that you're rushing today. You're going to be traveling again, are you?
Yeah,
And
South Africa for the elections.
I hope you're not going to be deported again and you're not going to cause trouble.
Let me put your viewers' minds at rest. The president's office in South Africa rang me up, and all I got at the other end when I picked up the phone was someone giggling until suddenly I realized that I knew this person. And he was giggling and saying, "Stephen, don't worry, you can come. We're not going to throw you out. We're not vulgar and authoritarian. You can come and say what you like. So I'll get into the country, and let's hope I stay out of trouble once I'm in the country."
I hope you're going to have a fantastic time and you're going to keep changing the lives for better. And I appreciate your work and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Les. Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Sports Social Podcast Network.